I believe that some of our panelists are still here. Alanna, Jim Harnly. I'm not sure about Linda and Edwina, but the first question is actually for Alanna. Alanna, why is vitamin E not a nutrient ingredient?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that question. Laura, I assume you're asking why was vitamin E not added as a fortificant for our ready-to-eat cereals for the 1920 FNDDS. We added nutrients for the fortification for the cereals for those nutrients that were primarily fortified across most of the ready-to-eat cereals. When you look at vitamin E for the most frequently reported, most popular ready-to-eat cereals, a lot of them do not have vitamin E added. Vitamin E really isn't a nutrient of concern in the American diet. And in looking at past What We Eat in America data, looking at what sources, food sources contribute vitamin E in the diet, ready-to-eat cereals is less than 5%. So our decision was not to add every nutrient that may be a fortified nutrient in ready-to-eat cereals, just those that were major and across most of the cereals. So I hope that gives you an understanding of that decision process.
Okay, the second question that we have for you, Alanna, is can you provide guidance on how to use the new 1920 version of FNDDS? And can this or should this be combined with 1718 data, or can it stand alone? And I would like to know the answer to this question too, because I'm dealing with pretty much the same thing with different versions and old data.
Well, let me just give a shout out to Edwina and her the last presentation we just heard, which really summarized why one should not use different versions of FNDDS with different releases of What We Eat in America. In the first part of my presentation, I talked about this interrelationship between FNDDS and the 24-hour recall method we use in collecting What We Eat in America data in NHANES. So each 2-year What We Eat in America data is collected with an updated version of our 24-hour dietary recall method, the AMPM. And it's updated for each of those 2 years, not the whole thing, but extensive parts of it. And what goes hand in hand with the AMPM then is the FNDDS, the application database that gives us the nutrient values for what's collected in our 24-hour recall. So the 1920 FNDDS will be used to determine the nutrient profiles for the pre-pandemic 1920 What We Eat in America data. And that is how it should be used. We do have other resources that's on the Food Surveys Research Group website that talk about changes that go on to the food codes and the food code descriptions from one version to the next in FNDDS. So I'd encourage you to go to the FSRG website to see those, as well as Jim Friday's poster on discontinued food codes, because that gives insight into these changing codes that are added or discontinued in each of the versions of FNDDS. So when you're using FNDDS, you should use it specifically to the 2 years of what we eat in America, because that's how it's intended. In addition, we provide extensive other information about FNDDS on the website, so you can go in, because I know others of you use it, not necessarily for analysis of what we eat in America, but for other purposes, for databases you're building. So we try to provide as much background detail as we can on each of the versions of FNDDS to help those of you who may want to optimize and use the information that we have in it for building your own databases. So I'd encourage you to go to the FSRG website, read the extensive documentation that's put out with each 2-year release of FNDDS to understand it. And if you can't find the answer, then just email me or any of the other FSRG staff who work on FNDDS, and we'll be glad to jump on a Zoom or try to answer your questions. So I hope that has helped answer this. I would also add, Kathy, there was a question before lunch in a session about, does USDA have a program available that analyzes data that's collected off of a 24-hour recall? Yeah. But we don't have a publicly available program for that. We, of course, have one internally that will analyze the data collected from the AMPM in concert with the appropriate FNDDS version, but we don't have one that's publicly available. And of course, I think that's kind of obvious because it depends on the questions asked and how they're asked in the 24-hour recall as to what food would you match it to and what nutrient profile would that food have.
Yes,
thank you.
I think they were talking about the smart tracker.
You know, and that's our colleagues at the Center for Nutrition Promotion and Policy Analysis. So if any of them are on this afternoon, they should as well jump in and add to the chat for that answer.
Well, let's go on to a question for Jim. Jim, the question for you is there information on the variability of arsenic in foods grown in different parts of the country, and the same for lead? Is it listed in foundation foods?
No, we do not have data on arsenic and lead. Your question would be better addressed to the Food and Drug Administration. USD has classically characterized nutrients and bioactive non-nutrients, not, well, you could argue that certainly arsenic and lead are bioactive, but potentially helpful bioactive nutrients.
Right. Linda, there were several questions for you. I think you have answered one in the chat, but I'll go ahead and ask this question that was posed. Could the Efpg indicators be merged with what we eat in America to indicate ready-to-eat foods reported in NHANES? And basically, how does it interact with what we eat in America and NHANES data?
I'll let Alanna jump in if I say something wrong, but the Efpgs were designed to categorize foods as purchased rather than as consumed, which are reported in NHANES data. The EFPGs, we've linked them to the supermarket and household scanner data from IRI, and those foods have been linked to FNDDS codes. So in that way, you could link the EFPG foods to FNDDS codes. But What We Eat in America has their own set of food categories that align with the foods reported in What We Eat in America. Alanna, if you want to jump in, if I've said anything wrong.
Nothing to add. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, all right, good.
The next question was, how are dried foods categorized by ERS FPGs? Excuse me. As an example, raisins.
That would be a separate tier 3 category.
Okay. And I think you did answer the question about whether the ERS FPGs were distinct from FDC's food categories and branded food categories. And I think you did answer the fact that they are different, or they're distinct.
Right. What We Eat in America food categories are distinct from the EFPGs, but the EFPGs could theoretically group branded foods because those are more in a purchased form. So,
right.
Mm-hmm.
Alanna, I'm not sure if this is who's going to answer this. Did the count of new food codes reported in NHANES cycles include those that were renumbered foods that existed previously?
I think that was a question for Edwina's presentation.
Well, I figured that you might be able to answer it because I don't think Edwina is here.
I just heard her presentation as you all did, so she would have to answer that.
Okay. Do we have any guidance on how to use food codes for individual profiles in order to estimate the average of some specific food? You know, I think we want to do that a lot, and it's a challenge. No one wants to take on that. I mean, I personally think it's, you know, if we're looking at what we eat in America, it's really based on a population, not an individual person. So anyway, Linda, I think there's one other question for you. Are the amounts sold of EFPG codes are by category publicly available?
Not at this time. The IRI data set is proprietary data, and we haven't posted the monthly food prices database yet. And if someone wants access to the IRI data, they have to go through ERS using a third-party agreement.
Right. I think there's one last question that I'm not sure, Alanna, if you might want to tackle this, but is there any recommendations on combining or not combining multiple survey cycles? And do you have plans to conduct similar analyses with FPEDs?
Let's see, let me address combining multiple survey cycles. There is guidance on the NHANES website for doing that. Each of the 2 years of data and then the nutrient values for all of the collection and the weights for that data is there. And so you can combine different cycles and do analysis for the nutrient intakes. If you're looking at food intakes, that's why you need to really look across FNDDS and changes that have gone on to FNDDS. But I think there's some very good guidance on the NHANES site for doing that.
Good.
The FPED analysis that was asked for Edwina, she'd have to answer that if they are going to plan to do that or not. And I think Lauren O'Connor asked that question. So,
Yes, she did.
and so, you know, the results I thought were so interesting of what Edwina presented. So I think we'd want to go back to Edwina and see what their plans are. Thank you.
Okay, well, those are all those are all the questions that are in the Q&A. If there's anyone who wants to raise their hand and ask a question, or that probably would be acceptable. Otherwise, you have about maybe 9 minutes to extend it to your break.